Welcome back to the Chasing Tone podcast. Today, my guest is a very good friend of mine named Cory Hall. I know you probably don't know who Cory Hall is, but I bet you know the guy who he used to work with is, and that would be Brad Paisley. So, Cory, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me.
So, you were the guitar tech along with Dave Rouse, right? That's how you pronounce his name, right? Rouse? Rose?
I always said Rose. I think it's Rose.
Okay. I've never asked Dave is
Yeah.
how you pronounce his last name. So, anyways, you and Dave
Yeah.
were the guitar techs for Brad Paisley. I mean, among others, but most recently it was you and Dave.
Yes.
And then, of course, you decided you wanted to kind of go in a different direction, and we can talk about that here in a minute. But I think the biggest question that people want to know, just up front and foremost, what's it like working with your guitar hero? Because you were truly a huge fan of Brad's before you started working with him, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The first few shows, it didn't even feel real, right? It just felt like, what the heck am I doing here? That was a question. Even before Brad, like there were multiple times in my career of touring that I was like, what am I doing here? And that was definitely like that with Brad, at the very beginning. It was a pretty cool experience for sure.
So did you feel like you weren't qualified to be there? Is that what you like?
Oh,
Why
yeah.
why am I here of all people?
Yeah, I did. And, it's kind of funny because I started out with Brad as drum tech.
Brad
And
doesn't play drums.
he does, well, he probably could.
He
Yeah.
probably could. I'm sorry.
I was drum tech for a little bit.
For
And
Ben,
then,
right? Ben Caesar, right?
yeah, I was Ben's tech for about 4 months. And I also teched the keyboards as well with Kendall. And I was there, like I said, for about 4 months, and then I transitioned into guitar tech. There was a personnel change, and yeah, Dave kind of told me he felt like I was miscast, in that drum tech role, which was kind of cool because I was, got into helping him out quite a bit in that world. So yeah.
So basically, Dave, the main tech for Brad, finds out that
Mhm.
you actually are one, a gigantic fan.
Oh
Two,
yeah.
you know a lot more about guitar than you do drums.
That's true. That's true. I had teched drums for on other tours that I'd been on, but just kind of like the general backline tech, right, where you did everything on the whole stage. Well, in that world, like at Brad's level, it was the drum tech, right? Like you needed to know drums like the back of your hand. And I definitely I wouldn't say I know guitars like the back of my hand, but I was a lot more comfortable in that world.
Did you ever like if he missed a note? Did you ever say, Brad, that's not how you play that? Let me show you. Did you ever have that
No,
opportunity?
no. Why would I do that? No. Brad, it always amazed me. And I'd seen, people, this was from years ago, right? Like I'd see people on YouTube say, "Oh, Brad Paisley doesn't hit a wrong note. He plays so many notes and it sounds perfect." I don't I don't know how he just like he has this thing when he plays that he will always get there, right? Like the band's always joking around, "Well, let's just find the one. Let's just hold on tight. We'll get back to the one eventually."
Right.
And it's awesome to see somebody that, incredibly musically gifted.
Right. And so just in case for the listeners, when Cory's talking about the one, he's talking about the Nashville system. So like if you're in E,
Well,
if your chords
just
are
any
E,
chord, just
right,
get back here,
right.
like
But
home
but
base, right?
some people aren't familiar with what like the 1 4 5 thing. So like
Sure.
if your chords are E, A, and B, then generally your E is going to be your one, and your A is going to be your four, and your B is going to be the five. It's like notes in a scale, one being the root, right?
Yeah.
So they're just talking about like hold on to the root note, hold on to the root chord, stay around there, don't go too far.
Yeah.
So how did you actually get to be a tech? Because you worked for Chris Young before Brad, right?
Yeah, I was with Chris for about 2.5 years. I moved to Nashville at the end of 2012, and I was actually playing for a couple different smaller artists, and then worked into kind of like a tech position with an artist that I eventually started playing for. But through that guy, he actually introduced me to a guy named Kevin Varnado that worked for Brad at the time, and he had the job that I most recently had with Brad, and just kind of worked out that way. And he became my mentor, and I told him that I was really wanting to get into the guitar tech stuff. Like I enjoyed working on the instruments and wanted to learn a ton more about it, and that was like super exciting for him to hear. Oh my gosh, here's somebody young and I can teach. and
Yeah.
he's incredible at it. He was so
Yeah.
good.
And he's a super nice
And
guy too. Kevin's
yeah,
super
and
nice guy.
Kevin and I, outside of him teaching me things about guitar tech, he just became a great friend. And still to this day, he just texted me a couple days ago, checking in on me. But yeah, that was awesome to have that. And it was funny because Brad's bass player Kenny Lewis is from close to my hometown in Ohio, so I knew of him. But the day that I met Kevin, Kenny stopped by, and it was the weirdest thing
Was it
because
surreal? You're like, oh my, that's you play with Brad Paisley.
no, I wasn't that way. I was just like, okay, what is going on? Like, why is all this happening all at once? But that day, Kenny, um, we exchanged, phone numbers and stuff, and he became, and still to this day is one of my best friends in the world. And it was just funny that two of my closest friends while in Nashville I met the same day, right?
That is pretty
Um,
crazy. Yeah.
but Kenny, let's see,
As CC
this would have
DeVille would say, it's written in the stars.
right, exactly. We went to Brad played the Bridgestone in Nashville, Bridgestone Arena,
Yeah.
and I kind of tagged along and hung out with Kenny. And at this point, I had no touring experience, right? Like none, other than okay, I played in bands that played in Broadway in Nashville, right?
Right.
So I go to the Bridgestone and hanging out with Kenny and meeting a lot of the crew and the band and all those guys. And then we joked about this a lot when I was with Brad, but um, the stage manager, Bill, that day that I was hanging out, he kept coming around the corner at just random times and would say, "Be careful what you wish for." And then, it was just like this random person in a movie that just keeps coming up saying the same thing.
Poking his head around the corner.
Yeah, yeah. And that it was almost like foreshadowing, right, of what was going to happen. But it was crazy. So that, they didn't have anything that I was qualified for at that time, right? And I took a few jobs here and there, some one-off things. I worked for Parmalee for about a month. In that job, I was the all-around backline tech. And then I had, some time in between there, some different stuff going on, and I was just in Nashville. And I got a call from Kevin Varnado asking if I could fill in for Chris Young's guitar tech. They had just let someone go, and I went out. This was like I think a Wednesday or Thursday, and we left the next night. And at the end of the second show, I asked the production manager, "Hey, should I like be prepared to take my tools or what?" And he's like, "No, you're not going anywhere." So I literally fill in for 2.5 years, right? But I, staying friends with Kenny. Kenny is Kenny Lewis. He's a songwriter outside of being Brad's bass player, and we would do writers' nights and stuff together. I would go play with him, and just did a lot of just recording demos and things like that with him. And we trying to think when exactly we went to Europe with Brad. When I was with Chris, this was last year.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after that trip, I ended up starting with Brad when I found out the drum tech position was coming open.
So if so let's say you're a young kid. You're just getting out of high school. You have no clue what you want to do with your life, but you want to be in music. So perhaps, as we all know, there's not a whole lot of money in playing music right now, unless you're lucky. How would a guy that loves gear, loves all that sort of thing, how would that guy get into a position of becoming a tech of some sort? Especially how to become a tech for someone famous.
I moved to Nashville, right? Like,
so that's step one is move to a major city like Nashville or LA, right?
Sure. For me, I knew a lot of people. I was really good at networking before I moved to Nashville. And then when I got there, I had to get better at it. Somebody told me once before I moved, and I was telling him, I kind of want to get involved in this and that before I move, but I don't know. And his response stuck with me. And we can go really deep with it. This applies more than just
please do.
This life. But he said, you have to be present to win. And I had to be there and be willing to work. I knew a lot of people that would move to Nashville and then just wanted something good to happen to them.
But didn't really grind it out and try to make it happen, right?
Yeah, they didn't realize that they had to be the ones to do it. And of course, you have to be great, but you also, at a certain skill, whether it's teching, but you also have to be good at almost marketing yourself, right? Like selling yourself and just being a friend. That relationships go a very, very long way, especially in Nashville, because you think, once you get out onto a tour, you're living with those guys, right? Like those are the guys that I've toured with. Some of those relationships, those are lifelong relationships,
Right.
and even guys that I haven't seen for 2 or 3 years that I toured with for a long time, I could go to dinner with one of them tonight and we would pick right back up where we left off. So having the ability to have those relationships is very, very key, and just being present in Nashville.
So I got to ask, did you ever step across Brad's dirty socks and think, holy crap, that's Brad's dirty, sweaty socks. That's so awesome.
I have one in my desk drawer. No, I'm kidding. No, like
I stole a pair.
Before moving to Nashville, like my family, we always would go to fairs and festivals and stuff, and would meet just, somebody, some smaller country artist or whatever. And I did it so much, met those people, that I almost became like desensitized to it, right? Like it just was like, oh, okay, they're a person. And then once I got in it enough, yeah, of course it was cool being around Brad all the time. Of course it was, but it was just like, you just get to know the person, right? And it just, I don't know how to explain it. I see a lot of people, even people that have been in it forever, they get starstruck about their boss. I'm like, why are you? Okay, whatever. But yeah, I mean, no, I definitely, the sweaty sock thing, I definitely never
had that. Maybe it's just me. I'm sorry. Maybe it's just me.
I mean, I've got some socks I could let you have at mine if you're that into it.
Yeah, I'll hit you up after this and work it out.
Okay.
So a couple other questions here. Of course, you had to deal with fans and people coming up the stage after a performance or whatever, and like, was there ever any like stupid, crazy experience you had in dealing with a fan in some way, or someone that just had to be close to Brad?
One of the weird, I guess you could say, weird things about my job there was, not only was I guitar tech and all of that, right? Like I went out in the crowd with Brad when he would run out to the other stage.
As he goes to the walk, he will walk around to the stage towards the middle of the arena or wherever, right?
It's usually sprinting, through 20,000 people.
Right. And you're a big guy, so I mean, you're kind of also...
but like, it was weird, right? Like it was weird, and not because I was with him. It was just weird, just a weird thing to witness.
And I'd people go crazy.
Do it so many times, and there's no organization to it, right? Like it's a free for all. You just go, and there were multiple times where people, there would be two of us with Brad, and then of course security and cops all around us. But there were a couple times where we would be almost back to the stage, and somebody would come up, and I would literally almost have to like clothesline them, because they just come out of nowhere, and you have no idea what they're gonna do.
Right.
Like it's funny. People, they get so excited that they just lose all common sense, and they don't know what to do, so they just start freaking out and running towards them. Right. And another instance, and this wasn't with Brad, but we played like downtown Pittsburgh with Chris, and he walked off the stage and went to his bus, and I was walking with him, and these people came out of nowhere running towards him, and he just looked at me, and I was like, I got you. And he just ran on the bus, and I locked the door until a couple cops showed up. I'm like, what were you going to do? Like if I saw you at the grocery store and came running at you with my eyes like wide open, or you might get a little nervous. Well,
I would be a little tempted to duck, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And it always it cracked me up to see it, because I get it. I get how excited those people are, but it's just like, hey, if you just come up and say, hey, nice to meet you, your music really changed my life, like that, okay, they're gonna be more receptive to that. But yeah, it got pretty interesting sometimes, and all that stuff.
Did as he's walking by, did anyone ever just reach out and like turn one of his tuning pegs on the guitar?
No, that's why I was there. They would go for it, but
I've always wondered that. I've been to several shows. I've always wondered that. I wonder if there's a guitar player out there that's just to be a jerk, like kind of reach through and turn one of his keys real quick, like now I'm trying to play. Ah.
well, I'm sure he would recover just fine. He would just like bend another note or something, right?
That's true.
Yeah, some of those arenas, like I remember in the Staples Center in Los Angeles, we played there, and there was like no aisleways, and we just started running, and there were people. It was so sold out that they put extra chairs around the dasher, like the ice hockey thing, right?
Right.
And there were chairs in the aisleway, and to get me and another guy and him running through there with all these people, it was interesting, to say the least.
Huh. That's crazy. So a little bit of tone-related stuff. Does Brad have a favorite amp? I know he's got a ton of them. He's got the DB. What is it? The DB from Dr. Z.
Four.
Right? DB4, right?
Yeah. He is definitely an AC30 guy, right? And a lot of the other stuff that he has is a cooler version of an AC30.
Gotcha. And he played
and
Marshall. He played some Plexis too for a while, right?
Yeah. He did, and he's got a bunch of that stuff, and the Trainwreck stuff. He loves those. Oh gosh, those things. Trainwreck amps. There is something magical about them, right? Like it is. I can't even explain it. It's just the feel too. They sound amazing, but they feel incredible. And that. So knowing like where he is, his home base, right? Like getting back to the one, like we were talking about earlier. His home base is an AC30 for the most part. Right now, of course, some guys like to blend an AC30 and a Plexi together, or Kevin Collier with Chris Young, when I was teching for him, he had two amps. One was like they were Morgan, so one was M50, kind of like a Fender Deluxe kind of sound, and the other was the AC40, that AC30 sound.
Right.
So, yeah, when you start getting into that blending stuff, I mean, there's definitely some magic there.
So you've been to obviously you've been with Brad on stage, but you've also been to his home studio.
Yeah.
Or I call it home studio, but the studio where he makes, all the records now, which is at his home.
Yeah, he has. It's basically the old farmhouse there at his place, and the entire place is now converted into the studio. And the first record they cut there, I think, all the way was Wheelhouse. And, of course I knew about it and had heard Kenny talk about it, and I'm going to the farm, and it's like when I got down, I was down there a lot. We were off the road, and I was there helping Dave with various projects and different things going on pretty much all the time. And it was a really cool experience to be there. And it felt homey, right? Like it just felt, oh, I'm at home. That's really cool. If that's something, if I ever have a home studio like that, I'm going to do as much as a home studio at that level, I guess. Just make it feel like home, right? He can just,
with my first, if I ever get $5 million to blow, that's the first thing I'm doing. It's building an awesome home studio.
Taking me out to dinner first if you get $5 million, then, but yeah, it was cool too, because he would just come down and just, I just want to record something. And to have something like that, if you think like, of course I have a home studio now where I can do that, but at that level, right? Like
right.
That's a pretty cool thing for him.
So would he just come down like he had an idea in his head and he just wanted to see how it would translate, or if it was a workable idea?
Yeah, he had that ability to do that.
That happened a lot?
When I was there, it was really the heart of the touring season, and I feel like he's kind of one of those people that just needs to be in that mindset of cutting a record. And the most recent album just came out last year, so they're not in that frame of mind yet to start with a new record. Of course they're always working on stuff and writing, but they weren't in that season when I was there.
Did you ever pitch him any ideas? Like, I got this great idea, Brad. It's a song. It's about this guy who loses his girl and his truck is broken down. Anything like that?
No, but man, I wish I could go back. No, I'm kidding. No, he doesn't want to hear any of my songs.
Brad, listen to this. It's a great song. Let me see your guitar.
On that though, there's a funny little story I do want to share because this goes back to being friends with Kenny Lewis. So this was a couple months after I met him, and I don't think I've ever told you this, Brian. So this is kind of funny. But a couple months after I met him, Kenny called me and he said, "Hey, do you have any way to record?" And I was like, well, "Okay, apparently I haven't told him enough about myself, but yeah, I've got some stuff. What you got?" And he's like, "Man, I just finished this song and I played it out at a writer's night thing, and somebody said I needed to have a demo of it, and I don't know." So he comes over one night and we record this song. He was gonna like, "Oh, you can comp this and that together, splice this stuff. We'll just do a few different takes." Well, we did that for a while and we came back to the first take. So we thought, "Oh, this song is gonna, we're gonna pitch it to some different people, try to get it on some sort of a commercial or something, right?" So we made one CD from that session, only one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, I had the file and email it to some friends and stuff, but there was one CD. So flash forward a couple months, and they are in the process of recording "Moonshine in the Trunk," that record.
Right.
And they're down at the studio, and Kenny is telling some of the writers that was around there about, "Oh, I just finished this song, but I don't know." And somebody said, "Well, you need to go take that to Brad. That is exactly what he needs. You need to go take that up to him." But like you were saying that, "Oh, I don't want to just pitch him a song," right? Kenny's had cuts on the albums before, but he never had one where he just walked up and said, "I've got this song." So he walks up and he hands him this one CD we made. A couple hours later, Brad called him and said he was going to cut the song. That song was "Gone Green."
Yeah, that's right. Kenny did write that, didn't he?
Yeah. And that was so cool to be a part of, just a little tiny, this was long before I worked for Brad, like years before I worked for Brad, but to be a part of something like that was just so cool. Like, he took a couple years to write that song almost. He was doing it here and there, and then he finished it and played it out. We recorded it in my tiny 650 square foot apartment in Hendersonville that I lived. That was my first apartment there. And so that was pretty cool. But yeah, I guess I never pitched my own songs, but I was a part of one being pitched at least.
That is pretty cool. Well, so being at the studio, I'm sure you've heard him play a ton of different things.
Yeah.
What did it sound like? Did he still sound like Brad Paisley, even if he was plugged into like the little gorilla amp at the corner?
Yeah. I mean, I'd always heard people say, "Oh, tone's in your hand, blah, blah, blah." Yeah. No, tone is in your hands. We were in Chicago and he just went out and bought a Les Paul and he played it on alcohol that night. Well, that was the only time he's played it in the show, since, I think. And, it was weird to see a Les Paul in Brad's hands, but it sounded amazing. Like it was Brad, like, I don't know. It's just weird, right? Like the tone is absolutely in your hands.
It's such a huge part to it. I think I realized that for the first time whenever, when I was first getting to know Brent Mason. I was at his house and I had talked him into giving me a lesson. This is like 15 or 18 years ago. And and he was just like, he didn't really have any amps. I think he had because this was at his house when all this stuff is usually in cartage for the studio. And it was like a pig nose or something like really small. And he played into it and my jaw dropped. I'm like, how in the hell are you getting that sound from that amp? And he's like, "I don't know. I'm just playing, man."
Yeah. I mean, there would be times that I would say, "Brad, what are you even doing?" And he would tell me. Obviously I got comfortable enough to be like, "What the heck are you doing?" But it was something that I started to develop, I guess, more that I always called that Paisley Attack, right? Like it was just a thing. And I didn't even realize that I was doing it until Brad wanted me to start playing like at Soundcheck and Dave too, because they needed to dial, tones in, and I was playing Brad's stuff because they needed to get the delay setting right, or, the Last Time for Everything intro, that weird chorus thing that's on there. You can't just like, I don't know, you have to actually play the part. So that was cool. That was totally cool for me to
be playing
realize
this song on his equipment and
sure, be playing on his rig, but to think, "Oh wow, I'm actually like learning from watching this. This is crazy," and being around it all the time. And of course, on in ears, you hear a lot more details and his pick attack and stuff like that. So hearing that hours and hours on end, I started to develop that. It's pretty cool.
Does he generally pick really hard, or is he a soft picker? Or
He gets pretty hard on it. He plays the Ernie ball heavy, just the plastic Ernie balls. Actually, got one sitting right here actually. I myself, I'm a heavy pick player as well. I like a lot of bluegrass stuff, so I play some acoustic flat picking stuff, and I like a blue chip pick, a little bit heavier. Yeah, I feel like guys that kind of have that speed or that certain attack will use a heavier pick.
right? Yeah, I got you. So I think it's safe to say his favorite guitar would that be his pink Paisley? What year is that Telecaster?
I honestly don't know. Yeah, old pink would be, and then the 52 Telly is as well. That I think that's another one of his go-tos.
That's the butterscotch one, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then the 63 Telly that the Fender Brad Paisley signature model was modeled after is also just an awesome guitar. And I know that he loves that one as well.
Yeah. I still have not played one of those. I know that's
Really?
crazy. Yeah, I still haven't. I would love to. I just haven't had a chance to.
Fender did an amazing job with that, and that's not me being a salesman right now. Like they really did. Brad and Fender spent years pretty much, developing that into what it is. And the pickups sound incredible. I mean, I'd like to just have a couple sets of those and just swap out in the pickups that I have in my tellies.
Right.
Like they sound great. And the necks on those feel great too.
So how much overall do you think Brad practices? I mean, is he sitting at home practicing scales? Is he practicing solos? I mean, what's his
think he
regimen?
does. I really don't think he does.
He just probably
I
plays
think
so much that
I think it just happens, right? Like with him, I think a lot of times he would want to come to Soundcheck not because he wanted to Soundcheck, but because he just wanted to noodle and play. Like he just wanted to mess around. Yeah, that's a good question. I really don't think that he does all that much.
That's interesting. So when he's recording his solos for the album, is he putting those together, or is that all just off the cuff?
That I don't know. Knowing him and seeing, him improv like in Soundcheck when they do different jams and stuff, I could pretty confidently say that's him just off the cuff.
That's ridiculous.
But again, I don't want to say because
Right.
I don't know for sure. But yeah, when the Soundcheck jams that went on forever that were just like they'd start out doing a Buck Owens thing and then that band is just so good.
They are.
I mean
Yeah.
it was crazy. And yeah, they played together for like 18 years or something like that, but just the jams were the coolest thing to watch.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite part of the show. Even though, I mean, I know that sounds terrible. I like the show, but the behind the scenes, the sound check stuff where everyone's just jamming and hanging out, to me, like that is just so real and raw. I don't know. I just always live like that. Really, with a lot of different artists in that way too, but especially with Brad.
The day that Alex came to a show last year,
Alex Clay. Yep.
Yeah,
Who works for Wampler.
Yeah. I kept trying to break away from Soundcheck to go get him in, and I couldn't. I felt so bad that I couldn't get him in before Soundcheck because it was one of those all day jams. Like it went on forever, but it was so good. And I went out to get him, and he said he heard it, but I was like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Like I thought that was never going to end. And there was maybe 3 or 4 times in the whole year that I was there that happened. But,
really?
Yeah. That that much, but it just so happened that it was the day that Alex came to the show.
Right. So he doesn't practice. He doesn't have like a practice routine. Well, actually, he doesn't practice. He's not sitting at home playing scales. What bands do you, and you may not know this, what bands does he like to listen to when he's hanging out?
I think his influences change all the time, and it was kind of cool because you can tell that in the show, right? Like they used to do, and I think they might be doing it again now. Hot for Teacher.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So the Van Halen thing, or you could tell when they would do an Eric Clapton thing, you could hear it in his playing that he was influenced for a little while by that like that season of life or whatever. He was influenced by Clapton, or maybe he just did a thing with Joe Walsh, so then for a couple months after that he was playing more like Joe. I think it's pretty obvious in his playing that there's just a ton of influences from different genres, different just musicians, not just guitar players. And for me too, that's when I started getting influenced by other people in different genres. That's when my playing started changing too, I noticed. But yeah, I definitely, always joked about that. It's like, okay, he's on a Clapton kick, he's playing like Clapton now. And then they would do a cover in the show. It was kind of funny.
Okay, so let's see what else I got here. So pedals. Back to pedals for a minute.
Yeah.
Obviously, Brad has a big rack of pedals he can choose from, any of them at any time, right? Because he's got this big MIDI controller. And he's got patches set up for songs, but he can also add a pedal or take away a pedal, correct?
Yes.
So how often is he tweaking something during the middle of a show, let's say? How often is he like, turn that delay up a little bit?
There were hand signals, right? Like, just nobody in the crowd would get it. Like, he'd look over and snap his fingers and go up or down. He wanted the delay up or down. And I think there were just little things like that. There were some during the show that he would, want some stuff, or he at a guitar change, he would say, hey, turn the cut up on AC30, that there were some of that, yeah, throughout the night.
Huh. So that was a pretty common thing then? To be tweaking things continuously.
Yeah, I saw it a lot. He had, like you said, he had patches for certain songs, and some nights maybe one of the overdrives wasn't cutting as much, but there's always a million factors in that, right? But for the most part, yeah, he would. I think if the pedals were at his feet, that would be bad for him, because I feel like he would be constantly messing with them.
He'd be the guy that was sitting on his knees just turning knobs while he played, right?
He would be me. That's what I used to do, right? Like, I used to yeah. That's why I had to downsize my pedal board, because I couldn't stop turning knobs.
Well, it's bad whenever you just have a chair and a table and your pedal board is in front of the table. You're like, yeah, I'm just gonna play pedals instead of guitar.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. Okay. So, what was there any like crazy moments where he's playing through one of the 20 heads that he's got there to the side, and he's like, change that completely. I don't want to use that amp on this song. Let's change this to, a totally different amp.
Yeah. So we would like on the road. Is that what you mean, on the road? Or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So on the road, we would constantly swap out amps, right? Like, we would just about get the rig sounding perfect for a couple weeks, and then he'd bring out something new and want to mess with it. And then it was like back to square one. But that was pretty cool too. Those days he would come to Soundcheck and he'd just want to swap out tubes, right? Like, one day he and I both learned, and this was funny, but we both learned about like putting a 12AX7 in the slot 1 that had a little bit higher gain, just that kind of thing, having an impact on the tone and the feel, and just swapping tubes around based on which tube socket they were, which number of socket they were in.
Right. So wow, that's getting really picky.
There were, well, I mean, why not?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if you could do it, yeah, heck yeah.
There were some days too where Dave and I would kind of just he'd get a box of tubes or something, or we would find them at the studio and say, oh, I wonder if these are any good. Well, we would just shotgun tubes, right? Like, we would, in the afternoon, we would just take an amp and a guitar and a cable and go out back somewhere and just turn it up really loud and just swap out tubes. Do that for like an hour or so. But that was really educational for me, because at the time, I didn't really know. Yeah, I knew what tubes were, but I didn't know kind of how they reacted like that. So that, being around that though, I don't want to call it the pickiness, but like his mindset of that kind of was bad for me, because then again, I started coming back to my rig going, well, he got his to sound like that. I need to change that out. Like I need to move that over here. And if I take this cable, yeah, that'll help the tone, right? Like, yeah. But yeah, it was. I think a lot of that was just um, almost getting bored. Like he would just get bored and want to mess with it. And
Right.
I think that is where Brad is one of the most creative people that I've ever been around. And I think, that's kind of just how he keeps the creativity going, right? He's never satisfied. He's always wanting to, with tone, he's always wanting to mess with the tone. And what is perfect tone, right? Like I don't think it exists, but I feel like the journey of getting there is just as much fun for most people, and Brad especially.
So it's crazy to think that a guy at that level, I'm both
Yeah.
professionally, I mean, financially, like everything. He's still going to the guitar store and buying pedals
Yeah. Yeah.
and different strings and like
Well,
everything else.
Dave and I would go, we'd be in like Guitar Center in Nashville and grabbing something, whatever. And then we would go over to the used pedal section, just be like, oh, that looks cool. I wonder if he'd like that. Then we would just take it back to the studio and see what he thought. And sometimes he'd be like, man, you guys just found like a diamond there. That's incredible. And we would do that just randomly,
Mhm.
right? Like there was never any rhyme or reason. But that was kind of cool. It's not like he needed any pedals, but he loved to explore with that stuff.
So were you ever able to like take anything home? You're like, hey, Brad, can I
Yeah.
borrow that train wreck for the weekend?
I wouldn't. I never did that. But Dave and I, Dave knows that I'm just a giant nerd when it comes to this stuff, and I probably drove him crazy asking a million questions. Well, how does this work? Why does this do that? Blah blah blah. But there'd be times where I'm like, man, I don't know how this pedal sounds with this and this, and he goes, take it home. So yeah, the pedals, I was doing that constantly.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yeah, for me to, I don't want to say sell it, but just have something to recommend to Brad.
Hmm.
For maybe we're doing a fly date and we're only doing one song. Um, Instead of taking an entire rig, we were only taking 2 or 3 pedals. And as long as I knew what those pedals did, I could recommend stuff to him just for a small rig like that. And there were several times that happened. And I would say, oh, well, I think this would work. This certain pedal would work because the other day when I was messing with it, I did this. And if I hadn't have had that time to just take it home, or just there at the house too.
Right.
But yeah, I love messing with gear and that kind of stuff.
So, was there any tricks that you think you picked up from Brad, just from being around him and kind of absorbing that?
As far as playing,
I mean,
or
I would say like not only in playing styles, but maybe so. Here's one example. So I did this on a video a while back, where I saw Brad. This is probably 2001 or so. At a concert, and he hit the wrong note, and then he hit the guitar and moved it up to the correct note. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know if that was a planned out thing, but I was thought, that's a cool thing. I'm going to steal that. So is there anything like that or any certain types of licks that he's done where you're like, I'm going to steal that for sure?
The benders. That's it. Like I'd messed with a B bender before, but it just drove me nuts. Brad obviously using a G bender,
It
I
raises
got
this G
pretty
string
comfortable with it.
a whole steps again.
And it just, to me, it just kind of opened up this whole new world, right, of options with playing. And just listening to him, and just like simple stuff like Perfect Storm, when he goes to that F chord and just he's holding an F, but he's bending using the G bender and bending it up,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how he gets that sound. And so just little stuff like that. When I would mess around with his guitars, I was constantly using that bender in various ways. But now my tellies, I don't have one on it.
You don't have a bender.
I don't have one.
Oh my
Nope.
goodness.
I need to get a G bender.
Yeah, Forrest Lee in Nashville. I know there's a bunch of guys that do it, but Forrest Lee has some fantastic benders. In fact, I need another one. I've got one with a G bender. It's a G
Mhm.
because of Brad. But I want to get a B bender in one of my tellies as well, and I'll probably use Forrest. The guy that put
Get
my benders in actually passed away, sadly.
Oh wow. You ought to get both. Have you seen like Jimmy Olander from
Yeah,
Diamond Rio?
Jimmy has a B and a G bender, right?
Yeah. I met Jimmy. We were, let's see, this was a show in Nashville. We played the Ascend Amphitheater when I was with Chris Young, and Diamond Rio came out as a surprise guest with Jared Neiman, who was opening for us.
Yeah.
And that afternoon at Soundcheck, like I love Diamond Rio, right? But I didn't want to be like, oh my gosh, it's Diamond Rio. Like I don't want to be that crazy guy running up to Jimmy,
just running
I'm
full
just-
force at him.
yeah, with my eyes wide open, like I was running at you in the grocery store. So I was just changing some strings, and Jimmy walked up and started talking to me, and he said something about it was a compensated nut on his telly. He was mentioning that, and I said, no, I've never seen that. And he goes, well, I'll be right back. He goes to the dressing room and he brings his telly back out, and it's like his number one telly that I've seen on every music video, and
Right.
and I'm just looking at it going, oh my gosh. So he starts explaining the G and the B bender thing, and if you listen to their song Meet in the Middle,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
like that's one of those songs I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense how he's getting those
It's
bends, right?
It's nearly
But-
it's impossible to play without benders.
Well, but yeah, exactly. He's using the G and the B bender. If you can go on and watch any of their live videos, and yeah, it's crazy. But that, like I said, that the bender thing for me just opened up a whole new world, and I miss it. I need to get one. I shouldn't have brought that up because now I'm going to drive myself crazy. I don't have a bender. I don't have a bender.
Now you're off to sweetwater.com to buy yourself a new guitar and to get a bender put in it, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
All right, so let's wrap this up. Is there any last things that you would like to tell someone that was you before you got involved in the industry? You know what I mean? In other words,
yeah,
the guy
I
that
mean-
loved Brad Paisley. Now you had Brad Paisley's number in your phone, like you know what I mean. So like you knew him that well,
Right.
I'm sure there's many times where you sat down and ate dinner with him or whatever. What would you tell the younger guy who would love to know as much as he could about Brad Paisley? Anything that stands out?
Never stop learning, right? Like if I had just been okay with what I knew, I wouldn't have got to Brad, right? Like I was constantly striving to learn, and even when I was there, I was constantly striving. And I think that goes back to just the cliche, never give up, right? Like you can do it, never give up. But when I look back on that time there, like it was hard to not get discouraged when certain things wouldn't happen. But I am a very big picture guy, right? And the big picture in my mind was, well, I didn't go to Nashville to say, okay, I'm going to work for Brad, but it just kind of happened. But the big picture was I wanted to get on that tour and I wanted to travel the world, and every little thing in between there, I just was able to navigate to that. But again, the big picture of it, I never lost sight of that. And I never lost sight of why I moved to Nashville.
Awesome.
And yeah, and like I said, the cliche never give up thing, I mean, I think that goes hand in hand with, just realizing that there's so much to learn and there's so much creativity within that learning. Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly learning stuff, even now, like every single day, I feel like I wish I could go back with what I know now. On whether it's recording or
Yeah.
playing or this, that, and the other. I wish I could go back with that, but having that desire to want to learn, it's kind of exciting to think about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a big thing. A lot of younger guys, they just get so nervous about, well, I don't know how to get there. Like I'm never that smart. Well, I wasn't either, but it just kind of happened because I didn't give up on, wanting to get better at it.
Right. It's
So-
it's kind of funny that you went to Nashville to be a player, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
and that's funny because That's kind of how I got in the pedal gig. I was driving back and forth from Indiana to Nashville like 3 times a week.
Oh
Playing
wow,
on,
I didn't even know that.
yeah, I was playing on Broadway. And in the process, I was modifying pedals, and I'd bring them with me. And you know how it is when you're playing on Broadway. You make friends, and so I'd give
Yeah.
people pedals, and take their pedal home and bring it back and modify it for them. And next thing you know, people stopped asking me to play and asked me to build them pedals more often. So. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it way back then. But
Well, and two, like for me, I think there's a lot of that. Not don't give up on learning. You never know what relationship is going to happen. There was when we were in London with Brad, and I was with Chris Young. We were opening for him. This was last year. I went up to Dave and asked him if he could help me. I was having an issue with the amp, and I asked him if he could help me. And because of I said, I don't know how to do this. Help me. I feel like our relationship just got stronger, and he brought that up multiple times while I worked there. He's like, "Man, that day you just came up and asked for my help." And then the funny thing was, later he needed a whatever certain tool, and he came to me for it, and I was like, "What? Okay, this is weird." So I asked him for help, and now he's asking. But if I had never, if I had just been nervous and just been like, "Well, I'll fix it later," I don't know.
Leave me alone. I'm looking for Brad socks.
Oh gosh, I hope he doesn't hear that.
Hey, guys gotta make it. You can always eBay those things. Put on Reverb.com.
Well,
Used pair of Brad socks.
Oh man, that's a retirement gig right there. Maybe I should start doing that.
We should have talked about this a lot sooner. So.
Hey, never give up, Brian.
Never give
Never
up.
stop learning.
Never give up with your dreams of finding
Selling
Brad Paisley
Brad's socks on eBay. That's gross. That's what that is.
All right, so let's wrap this up. Thanks, everyone, for listening to Chasing Tone Podcast. I really appreciate it. If you have any comments or questions, you can email me at podcast@wamplerpedals.com. If you have an email for Cory, I will gladly pass that on to him unless there's like 10,000 of them, which there probably won't be since there's not 10,000 people listening to my nasally voice.
You don't think 10,000 people want to listen to me?
I don't. They might. They might. Oh,
Hashtag Brad sucks.
No, don't do that. Unless you say that Cory Hall is the one that said that. No, I'm kidding. So anyways, if you have any comments or questions, please let me know, and we will talk to you guys next week.